Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of the most remarkable transformations in all of human biology. I want you to think of this almost like a high-stakes, rapid-fire origami puzzle. Over the next few minutes, we're going to watch how the human face, the nose, and the upper airways effectively construct themselves right from scratch. It is just a stunning piece of biological engineering, and the blueprints for it, they're hidden right inside your own early development.
Here's the blueprint we're following today. First, shaping the nasal cavity. Second, the nasolacrimal apparatus. Third, the pharyngeal arches. And finally, building the pharynx and larynx.
Okay, let's dive right into part one, shaping the nasal cavity, or the structural framing.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty anatomy, let's set up a quick temporal map. We're talking about a super condensed window here, stretching from just the 4th week of embryonic development to the 9th week. Think about that. In roughly 5 weeks, barely more than a single month, the entire basic framework of the human face is assembled, partitioned, and fused. The sheer speed of this biological transformation is absolutely staggering. To make sense of all this rapid geometry, we need to define our central anchor point. We call it the stomatium. Now, don't let the terminology intimidate you. Stomatium is really just the scientific term for the primitive mouth region. It acts as the central hub, the core foundation around which all of our early facial tissues are going to migrate and assemble themselves. So, right at the beginning of the 4th week, the setup features 5 distinct tissue islands, or prominences, surrounding that stomatium right in the center. Coming down from above, we have the frontonasal prominence, which is actually derived from mesenchymal neural crest cells. Then flanking the primitive mouth on the sides, we've got paired maxillary prominences, and right at the bottom, paired mandibular prominences. Those last 4 are actually derived from the first pharyngeal arch. I know it sounds a bit abstract right now, but these 5 little tissue islands are about to migrate and fuse to literally create your forehead, cheeks, jaw, and upper lip. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens just days later. By the end of the 4th week, these little localized, thickened buds of tissues start appearing on the frontonasal prominence. We call them nasal placodes, and they're formed by those neural crest cells. This right here is the very first distinct step in the development of your nose. By week 5, things get really dynamic. Those flat placodes undergo a process called invagination. Basically, they fold inward. They literally sink into the tissue to form what are known as nasal pits, which are surrounded by medial and lateral nasal prominences. These deepening pits, they're the primitive nasal sacs, actively carving out the hollow space that is destined to become your nasal cavity. Now, over the 6th to 10th weeks, this internal space gets partitioned off. The nasal septum drops down to divide the nose into the right and left cavities. But equally importantly, that septum actually fuses with the palatine shelves, which, remember, arise from those maxillary prominences we mentioned earlier. This crucial fusion completely separates the nasal cavity from the oral cavity. So we basically built distinct rooms in the house, a mouth below and a nicely divided nose up above. Moving right along to part 2 on our agenda, the nasolacrimal apparatus, basically the internal plumbing. So, quick question for you. Ever wonder why a really good, hard cry always leaves you reaching for a tissue to blow your nose? It's a completely universal human experience, right? But the reason for it actually lies hidden in a totally fascinating quirk of our embryonic development. The answer all comes down to our anatomical plumbing. See, we've built a direct drainage tube right between the eye and the nose. Tears get produced by the lacrimal gland up above the eye. They wash over the eye, drain down into the lacrimal sac, and then travel straight down the nasolacrimal duct, finally emptying out into the inferior meatus of the nasal cavity. So when you cry, you are quite literally flooding your nasal cavity with your own tears. But how does biology actually build this strange little tube? Well, the construction method is surprisingly bizarre. In the 5th week, lacrimal buds arise. But moving into the 6th week, biology doesn't just build a nice hollow pipe like you'd expect. Instead, a completely solid cord of ectoderm forms between the eye and the nose. It's solid. It's only later on, stretching from the 8th week all the way to birth, that this solid cord actually hollows out, a process called canalization, to finally create the open drainage tube. It's basically a build it solid first, hollow it out later approach to plumbing. Let's transition to part 3 and see how our foundational pillars are built, the pharyngeal arches. Now, what's really interesting here is this undulating, almost ribbed structure on the outside of the embryo. Starting early in the 4th week, these distinct ridges appear on either side of the future head and neck. There are 5 main arches we actually care about: arches 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. The fifth arch, it's rudimentary and mostly just disappears. Notice how these arches are neatly separated by outer grooves, which we call clefts, and inner indentations, which we call pouches. You can actually think of every single one of these arches as a pre-packaged construction kit. Inside the mesenchymal core of each arch, there are 4 key ingredients perfectly bundled together. You've got an arterial component for blood supply, a skeletal component for bones and cartilage, a muscular component to create movement, and a neural component providing all the cranial nerve wiring. So, when an arch develops into its final adult structure, it brings its own bone, muscle, blood, and nerve supply right along with it. It is an incredibly efficient modular way to build complex anatomy. And those inner indentations, the pouches, they act as the exact origin points for some absolutely crucial adult structures. The first pouch gives rise to the eustachian tube and the tympanic cavity of the ear. The second pouch eventually becomes the palatine tonsil. The third and fourth pouches actually drop down to form the parathyroid glands and the thymus. So much of our vital immune and endocrine architecture begins as just simple inward folds in the primitive neck. Okay, bringing it all together with section 4, building the pharynx and larynx, our final construction zone. Right around the exact same time the face is taking shape in week 4, the cranial part of the foregut is expanding to become the primitive pharynx. Notice how perfectly these systems integrate together? The upper portion, the nasopharynx, connects right up into the nasal cavity we just watched form earlier. The oral pharynx develops right behind the oral cavity. And where does the throat get all its strength? The musculature of the pharynx is developed directly from the mesoderm of those exact pharyngeal arches we just discussed. It all ties together flawlessly. Finally, we get down to the larynx, the voice box. And here is where we see that crazy build, destroy, rebuild plumbing strategy show up again. It starts out as an outgrowth from the foregut that elongates into a tube. But then, the tissue inside proliferates so rapidly that it causes complete occlusion. The larynx literally blocks itself completely off. It isn't until the 10th week that it finally recanalizes, opening back up to form the laryngeal ventricles. The remaining folds of mucous membrane that are left behind from this reopening process, those become your vocal cords and vestibular folds. Your very ability to speak is the direct result of a temporarily blocked tube clearing itself out. So what does this all mean for us? Well, the crucial takeaway here is this. Your entire upper respiratory tract, your face, your jaw, and the very structures that allow you to speak right now are born from this intricate, incredibly fast dance of shifting tissue islands, migrating neural crest cells, and tubes that intentionally block and unblock themselves. It is a truly breathtaking feat of engineering. And it really begs the question, if this much complexity, this much of an incredible biological blueprint goes into just the first few weeks of shaping our face and airways, what other astonishing secrets of construction are hidden inside the rest of us? Thanks for hanging out and learning with me today, and keep exploring.